Her amber eyes glowed inches from mine. I woke with a sharp breath, and the foxwoman froze, then bolted, her tail vanishing through the cabin door. A man wakes to amber eyes watching him in the dark, then the foxwoman vanishes into the woods. What happens next changes both their lives forever. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe for more. The cabin was supposed to be silent. Corin had chosen this place at the edge of the forest to escape the noise of cities and the memories of war. The walls of rough-hewn timber, the soft breath of wind through open windows, nothing more. Yet tonight, when his eyes snapped open, it wasn't silence that greeted him. A figure hovered above his bed, close enough that he felt the warmth of her breath. Long crimson hair spilled forward, framing a face marked by curiosity and hesitation. Fox ears twitched atop her head, alert and uncertain, and a flame-colored tail bristled behind her. Corin didn't move at first. The surreal sight struck him like a dream made solid. She leaned closer, studying him with wide eyes, half childlike wonder, half predator's caution. Their gazes locked. Faye gasped, her hand tightening on the edge of his bed frame as if she'd been caught in forbidden ground. Then, with a blur of movement, she spun away, darting through the wooden door with the swift grace of something wild. By the time Corin sat upright, the night was empty again. Only the faint creak of trees beyond his window remained. And yet, on the table by the window, a single strand of red fur gleamed in the moonlight. Corin sat in the dim glow of dawn, elbows on the rough-hewn table, staring at the tuft of fur resting there like a question he couldn't answer. The crimson strand caught the light and shimmered faintly, more vivid than any fox he had ever seen in the woods. He turned it between his fingers, coarse yet soft, alive with warmth that didn't feel like it belonged to an animal. No, it belonged to her. He had seen plenty of strange things in his years: burning skies of foreign wars, metal cities thrumming with industry, the endless void of transport ships ferrying soldiers between conflicts. But none of those things had struck him as deeply as the sight of her face leaning over his while he slept. Amber eyes, ears tipped in black, the subtle quiver of lips just before she realized he was awake. And then she was gone. Corin rubbed his face, half laughing at the absurdity. A foxwoman! In my cabin! His voice sounded rough in the silence, almost as if saying it aloud made it less believable. The forest outside was waking too. He pushed open the window and breathed in damp pine and cool air. Birds scattered through the branches, their songs sharp and bright. Somewhere far off, water rushed through the ravine that cut down from the mountains. For months, this had been his world, the quiet pulse of nature, untouched by human noise. It had been enough. Until last night. He should have locked the door. He should have grabbed the pistol under his bed the moment he saw her. That was the soldier's instinct: react first, think later. But he hadn't. Instead, he froze. Not with fear, but with something else, all. Corin shook his head and pushed away from the table. He wasn't going to sit around debating whether he had lost his mind. If she was real, then he'd find signs. If not, then perhaps the isolation was finally starting to gnaw at him. Outside, the earth was soft from last night's rain. He crouched near the cabin's threshold, scanning the soil. And there it was, prints. Bare feet, too delicate to belong to a man, too sharp at the nails to be human altogether. They led from his door into the tree line. His heart kicked. He followed. The forest swallowed him quickly, tall trunks closing overhead, spears of light breaking through the canopy. The ground dipped unevenly, roots tangling across his path. But the tracks were easy to follow, each print pressed with a precision that told him she moved fast, yet not recklessly. She belonged here. After 20 minutes, the trail ended at the stream. Corin squatted, scanning the rocks where water rushed clear and cold. On one stone, a bead of scarlet fur clung to moss. He reached for it, and a ripple stirred in the brush across the water. Corin's muscles tensed, but he forced himself not to lunge. Not to frighten whatever it was. A pair of amber eyes blinked through the leaves. His chest tightened. He didn't move. The foxwoman crouched there, half hidden, her hair catching stray rays of morning light like flame on the wind. Her ears flicked as if weighing whether to trust her own senses. When she realized he was staring straight at her, she made a soft sound, half growl, half gasp, and vanished deeper into the woods, as sudden as before. Corin exhaled slowly, sitting back on the stone. A smile tugged at his lips despite himself. She's real. For the next week, the signs became impossible to ignore. A wooden bowl he'd left outside was turned upside down, its contents gone. A rope he had hung to dry was tangled in strange knots no wind could have made. Once, returning from fishing, he found his door slightly ajar, and inside, his things disturbed. Not stolen, just shifted. A tin cup on its side. His boots nudged from their place. She was curious. Testing him. And so Corin began to leave small things out deliberately. A strip of dried meat. A shard of polished glass. A folded scrap of paper with a rough sketch he'd drawn of the mountain ridge. Each time, they vanished. Sometimes replaced by oddities, feathers braided with grass, pebbles smoothed flat, a bundle of herbs tied with stringy bark. It became a quiet game between them. One night, as he sat near the fire with a book open in his lap, he felt it, the weight of eyes on him. He glanced toward the window, the darkness beyond broken only by silver moonlight. For an instant, a silhouette flickered there, long hair, pointed ears, the glimmer of those unmistakable eyes. Then gone again. Corin set the book aside, leaning back with a laugh that surprised even him. "You're bold, aren't you?" he murmured to the night. The forest didn't answer, but he thought he heard soft laughter trailing away into the trees. It had been a long time since he felt this way, alert, alive, drawn forward by mystery instead of haunted by memory. Whoever she was, whatever she was, Faye had already shifted his world simply by existing within it. He had no idea yet how far she would take him from the life he thought he'd chosen. But he intended to find out. The days bled into one another, but the rhythm of Corin's solitude had changed. He no longer woke to silence. He woke wondering if she had been there while he slept. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle in the trees beyond the clearing, carried a new weight. She was always just out of reach. Always watching. One morning, he left a strip of dried venison on the stump near the stream. Instead of vanishing completely, it was nibbled, half-eaten, and placed neatly back on the stump with a single wild flower laid across it. That amused him more than it should have. She wasn't simply taking, she was answering. That evening, Corin sat on his porch, sharpening his knife as the sun dipped low. The forest was awash in golden light, insects buzzing, the breeze carrying the damp scent of earth. He didn't look toward the trees though he felt her there. He forced himself to act absorbed, as though the scratching of steel on stone was the most important task in the world. A branch creaked. Leaves stirred. Corin let the silence stretch before speaking low, steady, without looking up. "You keep sneaking around like a ghost. One of these nights, you'll give me a heart attack." A soft sound answered him, a breath, or maybe a stifled laugh. He turned slowly. There she was, half hidden at the tree line. Her hair caught the last of the sunlight, ears flicking, tail brushing the ground in restless arcs. She watched him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, weight shifted forward like a runner ready to bolt. Corin held her gaze, then deliberately set the knife aside. His voice softened. "Do you have a name? Or should I keep calling you Foxwoman in my head?" Her eyes widened as though startled that he'd asked. She pressed her lips together, tail lashing once, twice. Then, with surprising clarity, she spoke. "Faye." The single syllable hung between them like fragile glass. Corin blinked. He hadn't expected her to answer at all, let alone in his own tongue. Her accent was strange, lilting, but the word was unmistakable. "Faye," he repeated slowly, tasting the sound. Her ears perked, and she tilted her head as if testing how it sounded from his mouth. Then, with a flicker of embarrassment, she darted behind the tree. "Wait," Corin said, rising to his feet. He didn't chase, only stood at the edge of the porch, voice carrying across the clearing. "That's a good name. Suits you. Silence. Only the wind moving through the branches. He thought she was gone until he caught a flash of movement, her head poking back out just long enough to give him the smallest nod. Then she disappeared again, footsteps whispering away into the underbrush. Corin sat back down, pulse quicker than he wanted to admit. He whispered her name again into the twilight. Faye. From that night on, she tested boundaries with greater boldness. She left little offerings inside the cabin now, pine cones stacked neatly, a twist of bark shaped like a ring, a feather placed across his book while he slept. Once, he woke to find her perched on the railing of his porch at dawn, tail swishing lazily. The moment he stirred, she bolted, but not before flashing him a mischievous grin. Her voice came again a few nights later. Corin was returning from splitting wood when he heard it, faint and wavering in the dark. His own name. Corin! He froze, axe balanced in his hand, breath caught. The voice wasn't mocking or threatening, it was tentative, like someone repeating a word they'd only heard from afar. He turned toward the trees. You know my name now, huh? A flash of amber eyes, a ripple of red hair. She giggled, high and quick, and vanished again. Corin leaned on the axe, smiling despite himself. This was no longer a one-sided haunting. It was a game, and he realized with a strange warmth in his chest that he didn't want it to end. For the first time in years, the forest no longer felt empty. He had a name to whisper into it. Faye. Corin awoke one morning to find his boots missing. Not misplaced, not kicked under the bed, but gone. He searched the cabin, checked the porch, even retraced his steps to the chopping block outside. Nothing. But when he went down to the stream to wash, there they were, set neatly on a rock, each stuffed full of autumn leaves. A feather poked jauntily from one. He didn't need to guess who the culprit was. Faye, Corin muttered, shaking his head as he pulled them free. The laugh that escaped him was half exasperated, half admiring. She had gone from silent watcher to relentless trickster, and the forest echoed more often now with her laughter, quick bursts that darted away the moment he tried to follow. That evening, he decided to return the game. He set one of her pinecone stacks on his porch rail, but carefully swapped the top cone for a shiny metal button from his old jacket. Then he waited. Sure enough, not long after the firelight filled the cabin, he heard the faintest creak of wood outside. He cracked the door open just in time to see Faye, crouched low, tail swishing as she inspected the offering. When her eyes caught the glint of the button, she froze. Slowly, she reached out, pinched it between her fingers, and studied it as if it were a gemstone. Corin leaned on the doorframe. Like it? Her head snapped up. Amber eyes widened, and she stuffed the button against her chest as if protecting treasure. Then, for the first time, she didn't flee. Yes, she said. The word was clipped, her accent heavy, but it was clear. Her ears twitched, cheeks faintly flushed. Pretty. Corin smiled. Then keep it. Her tail flicked, the rhythm betraying nervous energy. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then finally managed. Why give? Because you gave me these, he said, gesturing toward the pinecone tower she'd built. Thought I should return the favor. Something softened in her face. She nodded once, then turned quickly and bounded into the trees, clutching the button tightly. From that day on, words crept into their exchanges like timid animals learning to approach. At first, she spoke single syllables. Food, fire, safe. Corin answered patiently, sometimes repeating his words slowly, sometimes sketching little symbols in the dirt to explain. She watched intently, ears pricked, tail curled around her ankles as though the effort embarrassed her. One night, as he prepared stew, she hovered in the doorway, nose twitching. Smelled good, she said carefully. Corin lifted a spoonful, blowing on it before holding it out. Want to try? Her eyes darted between him and the steaming broth. Slowly, she padded forward, every step cautious, until she was close enough to lean in. Her lips brushed the spoon, tongue tasting. The change in her expression was instantaneous. She blinked, then made a delighted noise halfway between a chirp and a laugh. Good! she exclaimed, tail whipping behind her. Corin chuckled. Glad you approve. She lingered longer that evening, sitting just inside the doorway while he ate, her knees hugged to her chest. She spoke haltingly, asking what the stew was made from, pointing at the fire and saying, Teach? He showed her how to stoke the flames, how to feed it wood without smothering it. Her eyes shone like she was absorbing every detail into memory. Over the following days, she grew bolder. Sometimes she mimicked his routines, standing with his axe and trying to copy his swing, though she nearly toppled over from its weight. Sometimes she perched on his roof, tail dangling down the eaves while she peeked through the smoke hole. Once he caught her sprawled across his bed, holding a book upside down as if determined to read it. When he stepped into the room, she squeaked, tumbled off the mattress, and darted for the door. But before she left, she tossed the book back onto the bed with a grin that told him she had meant for him to catch her. Every interaction painted her nature more clearly, mischievous, yes, but also timid, as if constantly testing whether he would snap or laugh. And each time, Corin chose laughter. One evening, as dusk deepened into blue shadow, she sat cross-legged by the fire, fiddling with the metal button as though it were a relic. Corin sat across from her, sharpening a stick into a crude spear point. Why alone? She asked suddenly, words clumsy but direct. Corin paused. The question hit harder than he expected. Alone was the choice he had made after the war, after losing too much. But hearing it from her lips forced him to taste the word differently. I guess, he said slowly. I thought I was done with people. Faye tilted her head. Now? He looked at her, at the glow of firelight in her amber eyes. A smile tugged faintly at his mouth. Now, maybe not. Her ears twitched, and though she quickly looked away, Corin swore he saw the corner of her lips curve upward. That night, long after the fire had burned down to embers, he woke to the sense of being watched again. He turned his head slightly, and there she was, curled near the hearth, her tail wrapped around herself, eyes half closed but still flicking toward him. For the first time, she didn't vanish when he caught her. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a man haunted. He felt like a man chosen. Corin was mending a fishing net when something whizzed past his head. He flinched, nearly dropping the cord, then looked down at the object that had clattered against his boot. A pinecone. He glanced toward the treeline. Sure enough, amber eyes blinked back at him, half hidden in the brush. Really? He called. That your idea of saying hello? The only answer was a quick rustle, then another pinecone sailed through the air, this one smacking the cabin wall with a thunk. Corin chuckled, set down the net, and picked up the first pinecone. He hefted it, aiming loosely. All right, two can play. He lobbed it back, not hard, letting it bounce off the ground near where she crouched. Faye yipped, tail fluffing, then scrambled higher into the branches above. A heartbeat later, two pinecones rained down in retaliation, one bouncing off his shoulder. You're asking for it now, Corin muttered, gathering ammunition from the ground. For the next 5 minutes, the clearing became a battlefield of harmless volleys, Corin laughing as Faye's giggles burst through the leaves. She darted from trunk to trunk, tail flashing like a banner, while he pretended to stalk her, throwing high and wide shots just to keep her squealing with delight. Finally she slipped, tumbling from a low branch and landing in the grass with a startled squeak. Corin jogged over, half worried, half grinning. You all right? Faye sat up, brushing dirt off her knees. She scowled at him for about 2 seconds before breaking into a grin. Cheat, she accused, pointing a finger at him. Cheat? Corin raised an eyebrow. I didn't push you. She tilted her head, ears flicking mischievously. Big. Strong. Too fast. She jabbed his chest with a finger. Cheat. Corin caught her hand gently before she could pull away. Her ears twitched, eyes flicking down to where his fingers held hers. For once, she didn't immediately bolt. Instead, her tail flicked in short, nervous arcs, and she whispered something almost too soft to hear. Mine! Corin blinked. What? Her eyes widened, realization crashing across her face. She yanked her hand back, tail puffing like a startled cat. No! No! She scrambled to her feet, face flushed, stammering for words she didn't have in his tongue. Not mean wrong. Before he could stop her, she darted for the trees, disappearing into the underbrush with a panicked rustle. Corin stood there a long moment, the word echoing in his head. Mine! It hadn't been said with malice, but with raw instinct, unguarded and unplanned. A word that slipped free from somewhere deep inside her. He ran a hand through his hair, chuckling despite the ache in his chest. Guess I'm not the only one slipping these days. That night, he left no offerings on the porch, no bait to draw her back. He wanted her to come of her own choice. But he kept the fire burning a little longer, sitting at the table with his book open, glancing at the door more often than he'd admit. She didn't come. The next morning, the woods felt quieter. He missed the sound of her laughter, the sudden streak of red fur through the trees. Even her mischief, her habit of stealing little things and moving them, was gone. The cabin seemed too neat, too still. He told himself she'd return when she was ready. But as dusk fell and still no sign of her came, the certainty began to slip. Corin stood on the porch, looking out across the clearing, the forest looming beyond. He cupped his hands around his mouth and called into the twilight. Faye! Only the echo of his own voice answered. He sighed and leaned against the railing, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't mean to scare you off, you know. His voice was softer now, not really meant for her, but for the woods themselves. I liked it. Hearing you say my name, hearing yours. I don't care if you slip with words. Means you trust me. A long silence followed. He almost gave up and turned inside when a faint sound drifted from the trees, a rustle, then the briefest flicker of amber eyes. Corin smiled faintly. He didn't push, didn't move closer. He simply said, I'll be here. When you're ready. The eyes vanished again, but he felt a little less alone as he went back inside. That night, he slept lighter, hoping to wake again to the sound of her laughter, or perhaps to the whisper of that single word, spoken without fear this time. The forest pressed heavy with silence the next morning. Corin woke before dawn, restless, and stepped outside into the cool mist clinging to the clearing. He scanned the trees, listening for the faint rustle of her movements, the high giggle that had begun to anchor his days. Nothing. She was gone. He tightened his coat and slung an axe over his shoulder, less as a weapon and more as company. It had been years since he'd chased after anyone, years since anyone had been worth chasing. But the image of Faye's wide amber eyes, her face burning with shame as she fled, gnawed at him. He wasn't going to let it end with her thinking she'd ruined everything with a single word. The trail was faint but there, bent grass, a paw-like indent where her foot had struck mud. He followed through the thinning mist, weaving between trunks as the sun spilled pale light through the canopy. 2 hours later, the tracks led him to a hollow where the stream split in two, forming a mossy island. There she sat, knees pulled to her chest, tail wrapped tightly around herself. Her ears drooped, her usual alertness dulled. For once, she didn't bolt when he approached. She just stared at the water as if it might swallow her whole. Corin set the axe aside and lowered himself onto the opposite bank. He didn't try to close the distance yet. You've been avoiding me. Phasers flicked, but she didn't look up. Shame, she murmured. The word came halting, but heavy with meaning. What for? She hugged her knees tighter, words stumbling over each other. Wrong. Say wrong. Not mean. You not mine. Corin leaned forward, elbows on his knees, speaking gently. Faye, you didn't say anything wrong. Her head shot up, eyes flashing. Wrong. She faltered, language failing her. Her hand pressed to her chest, then reached out helplessly as if to catch the words that slipped away. In here. Come out. Wrong way. Corin's chest tightened. She wasn't just afraid of him. She was afraid of herself, of what she felt spilling out unbidden. He stood, walked into the stream, boots soaking through, until he stood on the mossy island across from her. She shrank back, eyes wide, tail curling tighter. He crouched to her level. Listen. I'm not angry. I didn't think you were trying to claim me like a prize. I heard what you meant. You trust me. You care. Her lips parted, a soft sound escaping. Care? Yes, Corin said firmly. And I care too. Enough to chase you out here when I could have let you run. For a moment, she just stared at him, trembling with the weight of his words. Then, slowly, she lifted her head, ears angling forward instead of flat. You not leave? Corin gave a small laugh. Not a chance. Took me too long to get used to pinecone wars and stolen boots. That startled a laugh out of her, small, shaky, but real. Her tail loosened from around her legs, flicking tentatively in the grass. Faye, he said softly, reaching out his hand between them. He didn't touch, only offered. You don't have to run from what you feel. Not with me. She stared at his hand as if it were a snare. Then, with agonizing slowness, she placed her own in his. Her fingers were light, trembling, but she didn't pull away. The contact broke something open between them, an invisible wall that had stood since the first night she hovered over his bed. Her ears twitched, her gaze searched his face, and for the first time, she didn't look like she was poised to vanish. Corin, she whispered, almost reverently, as though saying his name grounded her. He squeezed her hand gently. That's me. The forest around them stirred with wind, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Faye leaned forward suddenly, pressing her forehead against his shoulder in a gesture that was half apology, half surrender. He froze for a heartbeat, then wrapped his arm around her back, holding her carefully. Her voice was muffled but clear. Not wrong, if you hear true. Corin smiled against her hair. I heard you, Faye. Loud and clear. For a long time, they stayed like that on the mossy island, the water rushing around them as if guarding their fragile truce. It wasn't a confession, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that neither could run from now. When she finally pulled back, her eyes no longer carried shame. They carried something else, mischief rekindled, a spark returning. She poked his chest lightly. Still cheat. Corin laughed, shaking his head. I'll take that over silence any day. The forest felt different after that day on the mossy island. Faye no longer vanished the instant Corin noticed her. She lingered, testing the edges of their truce with mischievous boldness. When he carried firewood, she would snatch a log and dash into the trees, forcing him to chase. When he washed clothes in the stream, she splashed him until both were soaked, her laughter ringing louder than the water's rush. And every time she darted away, she returned a little sooner. Every time she teased, she edged a little closer. One evening, Corin was repairing the cabin's roof when he heard the faint patter of feet below. He leaned over the eaves and nearly lost his hammer when he spotted her, standing in his boots again, which dwarfed her feet comically. She tottered back and forth with a grin, arms out like wings to keep balance. You're going to break your neck, Corin called. Faye looked up, ears flicking, grin widening. Big boots, mine! Not a chance, Corin muttered, climbing down. By the time his feet hit the ground, she was already loping clumsily toward the tree line, boots flopping with each step. Faye! He shouted, half exasperated, half laughing as he gave chase. She yelped gleefully and ran faster, weaving between trees. But she had forgotten, this time, he wasn't pretending to be slow. Corin lunged, catching her around the waist just as she stumbled over a root. They tumbled together into the grass, rolling to a stop with him braced above her, one hand planted in the earth beside her head. Her amber eyes went wide. For once, she didn't scramble away. She just lay there beneath him, breath quick, ears twitching wildly. Corin realized how close they were, how her hair spilled across the grass like fire, how her tail brushed against his leg, how her lips parted slightly as though caught between words and silence. Caught you, he said softly, his voice lower than he intended. Faye blinked, her mouth quirking into a nervous smile. Cheat, she whispered again, but the word lacked its usual bite. It was softer now, almost fond. Corin chuckled, leaning back just enough to give her space. You call me a cheat every time I win. She tilted her head, eyes never leaving his. Then, to his surprise, she reached up and tapped the tip of his nose with one finger. Mine! She breathed, this time deliberate. Corin's heart thudded hard. The word didn't carry shame now. It carried choice. He searched her face, the flick of her ears, the tremble in her tail. If I'm yours, he murmured carefully. What does that make you? Her cheeks colored, but she held his gaze unflinching. Yours. The silence between them thickened, charged. Corin's hand, still braced on the ground, inched closer until his fingers brushed against hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, she twined her smaller hand through his, grip uncertain but steady. Her tail swished once, curling against him, then stilled. Faye, Corin said, her name grounding him as much as it seemed to ground her. She exhaled shakily, then leaned up just enough that her forehead touched his. Her eyes slipped closed, and for a moment neither of them moved, suspended in that fragile closeness. Corin could have kissed her then. The thought flickered, hot and insistent. But he didn't. He waited, giving her the choice. Faye pulled back slightly, eyes opening, studying him. She tilted her head with a mischievous spark returning to her gaze, as though daring him to guess what she was thinking. Then she wriggled free, darting up onto her feet with a laugh that rang through the clearing. But she didn't run far. Just to the edge of the trees, where she turned, tail flicking playfully. Next time, you not win. Corin sat up, brushing grass from his clothes, heart still hammering. He grinned despite himself. We'll see about that. As she vanished into the woods again, the air between them felt changed. No longer fragile, no longer uncertain. Whatever game they were playing, it was no longer just mischief. It was something deeper. Something neither of them could laugh away. The night after their chase lingered in Corin's mind like a half-finished song. He replayed it while chopping wood, while setting snares, while lying awake long after the fire burned low, the weight of her forehead against his, the words she had whispered so deliberately. Mine! And though she hadn't run far, though she had laughed and vanished into the trees like always, something had shifted. He felt it in the silence that followed, charged instead of empty. When Faye appeared again, she didn't hover outside the cabin or tease him from the tree-line. She stepped inside. It was late, the fire snapping low, when he turned and found her standing in the doorway. Her tail brushed the wood, ears half-folded, face serious. For once, no mischief glimmered in her eyes. Faye? Corin said, setting down the tool he'd been polishing. She crossed the room with careful steps, sat by the hearth, and drew her knees to her chest. For a while, she stared at the flames, her silence louder than words. Then, without looking up, she spoke. I not belong, she said slowly, halting as though shaping each word cost effort. Not here. Not there. Corin lowered himself to sit across from her. There? Her ears flicked. My kin. My people. Fox clan. She gestured vaguely toward the forest, then pressed a hand to her chest. They send away. Cast out. Corin's brow furrowed. They exiled you? She nodded once, her jaw tightening. Curious. Too much. Ask questions. Follow, humans. She winced as though the word itself were dangerous. Not allowed. They say wander, learn, never return. Corin leaned back, absorbing the weight of it. She hadn't just stumbled onto his cabin by chance, she'd been pushed into his world, unwanted by her own. And now you're here, he said quietly. Finally, her gaze met his. Now here. With you. The firelight painted her face in shifting gold and shadow. Her tail twitched, restless, betraying nerves. Danger, she added softly. If choose wrong. If stay with human, never fox again. Corin's chest tightened. She was telling him more than facts, she was confessing. Choosing him wasn't a game. It was a fracture with her people that could never be undone. He reached across the small space, palm up. Then let them keep their rules. You don't need to go back. Her ears twitched, eyes narrowing as if testing the truth of his words. Easy for you. You, not lose. I lost plenty, Corin said, voice rougher now. He thought of war, of names buried with no graves. He thought of why he came here at all, to live in silence. But I don't regret staying true to what I felt. Not once. Faye's lips parted, and her hand crept toward his. She placed it gingerly against his palm, her claws grazing him but not breaking skin. You, not afraid? Of you? Corin asked, meeting her gaze steadily. Never. She exhaled shakily, then slid closer, until the firelight pooled across both their faces. If I stay, she whispered, I am yours. All. No half. The weight of her words pressed heavy in the cabin, making the crackle of the fire seem distant. Corin didn't answer immediately. He wanted to be certain she understood, that this wasn't pity or passing infatuation, but choice. He brushed his thumb across her knuckles. Then stay. Something in her broke. Not in weakness, but in release. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his chest, her tail curling tight around his legs. A low, trembling sound rose from her throat, halfway between a purr and a sob. Corin wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. He felt the tension leave her body, the way she melted against him as if the words had unshackled her. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet but steady. Mischief glimmered faintly again, tempered by something deeper. Still cheat, she murmured. Corin laughed softly, brushing a strand of her fiery hair behind her ear. If that means I get to keep you here, I'll cheat every day. For the first time, she didn't run, didn't hide. She stayed curled against him until the fire burned low, the night outside deep and endless. And Corin knew, whatever rules her clan had set, whatever exile meant, she had chosen. And so had he. The mornings changed after that night. For months Corin had woken alone, his only company the sigh of wind through the trees. But now, when dawn spilled pale light through the cabin, he sometimes found a foxtail draped over his leg, or a mop of fiery hair pressed against his shoulder. Faye would pretend to be asleep when he stirred, her ears twitching in betrayal, but the faint curve of her lips always gave her away. He stopped pointing it out. He liked pretending too. Life with her carried a rhythm he hadn't realized he missed. They cooked together, well, he cooked, and she taste-tested with exaggerated critiques. Too salty, she would say, tail flicking, only to lick the bowl clean minutes later. She tried chopping vegetables once and nearly shredded the cutting board along with them, grinning sheepishly as Corin gently took the knife back. Chores became games. Hauling water turned into splashing contests that left them both soaked. Chopping wood became a challenge of how many logs she could carry in her arms before dropping them all in a heap. She sulked when she lost, but the moment he teased her, she pounced on him, tail flailing, declaring victory in laughter instead of numbers. Sometimes, at night, she asked for stories. Her language was still halting, but she drank in his words like water. He told her of the stars beyond the forests, of ships that crossed emptiness, of places where light never reached. She listened with wide eyes, tail coiled around her like a blanket, and when he finished, she always whispered the same thing. More. And sometimes she told him pieces of her own. Her people's moonlit dances, their songs sung in a tongue that curled around syllables like music. The way their clans moved like rivers, always flowing, never still. But when she spoke of them, her voice grew distant, and her tail curled tighter, as though the memories hurt to hold. Corin never pressed. He simply stayed close, offering presents where words failed. One evening, while patching the roof, he glanced down to find her wearing his shirt, one of his larger ones, sleeves dragging past her fingers, the hem nearly to her knees. She twirled in the clearing as though it were some regal gown, her tail swishing proudly beneath it. Faye, he called down, half exasperated. That's not a dress. She stopped, ears perked, then tilted her head with a sly grin. Mine, she said, tugging at the fabric. Corin groaned, covering his face with one hand. Everything's yours, isn't it? Yes, she replied brightly, spinning again. And the ridiculous part was, he didn't mind. As summer deepened, the cabin filled with signs of her. Feathers braided into the rafters. Stones arranged in neat spirals outside the porch. A faint scent that clung to the furs where she slept, warm, wild, uniquely hers. Corin found himself moving things to make space for her trinkets, her presence. Without realizing it, solitude had given way to partnership. But it wasn't only mischief and play. There were quiet moments too. Like the night a storm broke across the valley, rain lashing the roof, thunder rolling like drums. Faye crept into his bed without a word, shivering. Her ears twitched with each rumble, her tail curling around him as if anchoring herself. Corin said nothing, just pulled her close. She fell asleep like that, breath steadying against his chest. Or the morning he caught her trying to mend one of his torn shirts. The stitches were wild, uneven, but she thrusted at him proudly. "Fix," she declared. Corin put it on anyway, even though the sleeve hung crooked, and wore it all day without complaint. She followed him with a grin so smug it nearly split her face. These were the moments that built something stronger than words. One night, as they sat by the fire, she pressed close, her tail curling across his lap. She traced the lines of his hand with her clawed fingertip, frowning as though puzzling out some mystery. "Corin," she said softly. "You stay with me?" He blinked. "I thought that was already settled." Her ears lowered. "Not game?" asked True. Corin set his book aside, catching her hand in his. "Then I'll answer True. I'll stay with you, Faye. As long as you'll have me." Her face softened, and for once, she didn't laugh, didn't tease. She leaned in and pressed her forehead to his again, eyes closed, a faint smile tugging her lips. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full. The leaves began to turn. Gold and crimson drifted through the clearing, carpeting the earth in a mosaic that crunched beneath their boots. Well, beneath his boots. Faye still refused to wear her own, insisting Corin's were better, though they swallowed her feet comically. Autumn suited her. Her hair blazed like fire against the dying forest, and she seemed to grow wilder with the season, more alive. She darted ahead on walks, chasing falling leaves as though they were prey, then doubled back to tug his sleeve impatiently when he lagged behind. But there were nights too when she grew quiet, her amber eyes fixed on the moon above the treetops, tail curled around herself in a protective loop. On those nights she spoke less, and when she did, her words were tinged with longing. "Moon sings," she murmured once, perched on the porch railing. "Clans sing too." "Thar." Corin leaned against the doorframe, studying her profile. "You miss them." Her ears flicked. She didn't deny it. "Then why stay here with me?" he asked carefully, not accusing, just searching. Faye looked at him for a long time, her eyes reflecting firelight and moonlight together. She hopped down from the railing, landing lightly, and padded across the porch until she stood before him. Her claws brushed his hand as she took it, pressing it against her chest. "Because here, not exile." Corin's breath caught. She struggled for words, her voice halting, but her meaning sharp as a blade. "With Clan I was wrong. Too curious. Too much. With you, I am right." He swallowed hard, tightening his grip around her fingers. "Faye." Her tail brushed his side as she leaned in, resting her forehead against his chin. "Not exile. Home." The word struck him like an arrow. He had built this cabin to be a refuge from the world, a place to bury the past in silence. Yet somehow, she had walked into it and filled it with life until it became something more than a hiding place. A home. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, and she purred softly, a low, steady vibration that resonated in his chest. For a long while, they simply stood there, listening to the wind through the trees, the forest alive with quiet sounds. The next morning, he woke to find her sprawled across his bed in her usual chaos, his shirt half off one shoulder, tail draped over him, her hair tangled across his chest. When his eyes opened, hers blinked open too, and she flushed at being caught watching him again. Instead of fleeing, she whispered, "Mine!" with a mischievous smile that carried no shame now. Corin chuckled, brushing her cheek with his thumb. Yours. And you're mine. She nestled closer, her purr deepening, and he felt the weight of it settle into his bones. This wasn't a passing trick of curiosity or exile. It was a bond neither of them could undo, and neither of them wanted to. Beyond the trees, the forest whispered with more than wind. Some nights, Corin thought he saw faint amber eyes glimmering at the edge of the clearing, watching. Other foxfolk. Curious. Waiting. He didn't know what it meant, whether they judged, or wondered, or perhaps plotted. But he knew one thing with certainty: Faye had chosen, and so had he. Whatever came, they would face it together. And for the first time in years, Corin felt not like a man surviving, but like a man who belonged. She found a home in him, and he in her. But the forest is never silent for long. If you want to hear what comes next, make sure you're subscribed.